Welcome back to BBN After Dark. We continue our position previews for the 2024 season today with the third base position. And I'll tell you what, this one, we got some loaded names at the top. We got some really interesting names in the middle, and we've got some really up and coming, exciting guys toward the bottom. So really excited to talk about this position. A little bit of a smaller position. Obviously, third base is a little specialized, when compared to second base and definitely the outfield. So a few less names to run through here than normal, but really excited to get into some really exciting players on this list. Let's go ahead and start right at the top with the superstar category. So if you missed the other position previews, we are going to split these guys into four categories. We have our superstars, which are the best of the best. We have our veterans, who are guys who are established top team players. We've got our depth, who are guys who are maybe on the second team, maybe rookies, maybe, guys who are looking to make an impact on the second team and maybe on the top team later in the year. And then we've got our up and comers, which are some of our top prospects and rookies. So let's go ahead and get right into it with the superstars, starting at the top with Brennan Nickerson, one of the best players in Bear history, definitely going to go down as a legend in the Bears. I mean, the Bears, home run leader currently. This guy's just a beast, hit 19 home runs last year, just a monster year, broke the Bears high school home run record by a mile. And this guy, I mean, what is there to say about him? Just an absolute animal. And Bernie, I actually want to get your perspective here. Brennan, you're talking about a guy who nobody can question this guy's bat. I mean, he's been one of the best hitters in the Bears since really 13, 14U. This guy's just been a dominant player. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Brennan Nickerson, his 2023 season.
Yeah, a good 2023. I think that, out of the 18 Floyd lineup, I think that Brennan's someone that, every other team fears when they come up to the plate. He's always batting 3 or 4 in a big, typical power bat position, and then he hits balls that, no one else in the Bears hit balls that far. And his work ethic is, good to where he's not going to fall off anytime soon. He'll finish his Bear career very strong here in 2024.
Yeah, I agree. When you're actually looking at Brennan's season from last year, he had, he's always kind of been known as a boomer bust type player, but he continues to limit the strikeouts. He had a career low, at least since 10U. He had the lowest strikeout rate of his career since 10U. I mean, just really impressive how he continues to evolve his game. So a career high extra base hit percentage, a basically career low strikeout rate. So just really impressive to see how this guy continues to develop. Let's go ahead and go to the next name here in the superstar category, and that is Ben Combs. This is a guy who I know all three of us were really high on coming into this year. He had a really nice fall of 2022 and then comes out and really plays really well all year last year. A loaded team, had an OPS over 1100 and had more extra base hits and strikeouts, which is always very impressive. KJ, this is a guy I know you've liked for a long time. Got a chance to coach him this year in the BWL. Tell me about Ben Combs. I mean, just a guy who continues to get better every year. Give me your thoughts on Ben Combs' 2023 season.
Yeah, Ben's a superstar and in a lineup full of superstars. He's the guy who leads the troops in that lineup. He can hit for power. He hits for average. He plays good defense. The only knock I could have on Ben is that sometimes he's a little too passive at the plate. We talk about the big time hitters. It can hurt good teams when big hitters walk. So I think, I don't know how his regular season went, but I know in BWL, Ben, he might have taken too many walks, taking pitches that they might be balls, but superstars can hit. But all in all, Ben's a superstar. He's gonna have a monster year.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what can this guy not do? He continues to get better and better, and I'm just excited to see how he continues to develop going into his fourth season with the Bears. It's crazy. It feels like we were talking about him in the Rookie of the Year conversation not too long ago, and now he's entering his fourth season. So really exciting to see how he continues to develop. And then the final guy here in our superstar category is going to be Parker Ells, and he's a guy who didn't quite have a Parker Ells standard of a year last year. He was still very good. I mean, still an OPS over 1100, an extra base hit rate over 15%, which are, numbers that are going to be top 25 in the Bears, but it wasn't necessarily that dominant MVP caliber Parker Ells we've seen in the past. And an interesting thing for me is his strikeout rate went way down. And to me, that kind of tells me he was maybe trying to shorten up, put it in play. Parker came out really slow in April and maybe the early bit of May. And, it just felt like toward the end of the year, he was trying to not fail more than he was trying to do damage, because he saw a career low extra base hit rate and a career low strikeout rate, which kind of tells you he was maybe trying to put it in play a little bit too much. But Bernie, when you're looking at Parker Ells, still a very good season, hit over 400, had 26 doubles, led the team in RBI. So you're talking about a guy who still put up all-star caliber numbers, but maybe not MVP caliber numbers. Give me your thoughts on Parker Ells' 2023 and where you see him in 2024.
Yeah, like you said, he put up all these great stats, despite having, pretty. I mean, you could call it a pretty bad April and May. Like there was some, worry going around that maybe Parker wasn't going to be Parker the rest of the year. But then, come later in May, he turned it back around, and if you get rid of those first 2 months in stats, he probably is, at the back end of the MVP conversation. And nothing makes me question his work ethic. So 2024, I know he's going through some injury right now. Whenever he's back, and he gets back to being adjusted, I think that he'll come back in. He'll be one of the best players in that 14U team.
Yeah. One thing I will say about Parker is I was really impressed with his defense all year. I mean, this guy has gone from a defensive liability to a very good third baseman, and a guy who, when he wasn't at third, you felt it last year. He was very tough to replace when he wasn't playing third base. And I think this is a guy who has come a long way in both sides of the ball, and I'm excited to see how he continues to progress in 2024. Let's go ahead and move on to our next category here, the veterans. These are guys who have been in the Bears for a little while. All of them are on their top teams in their respective age groups. And let's go ahead and get things started with a little bit of a younger guy in Carson Griffith. This is a guy who, I think he's entering his third summer with the Bears, maybe his second summer, and he just completed his second fall. But this is a guy who has really quickly emerged as one of the best players on that 11U Floyd team. Hit 470 last year, an OPS plus of 110, and a really solid season. I will say, just looking at his numbers, he does strike out a little bit more than I think of when I think of Carson Griffith, but the power numbers are good. The walk rate is good, and the defense is really, really solid. Bernie, I'm actually going to go back to you for this one. I know you've been getting a long look at Carson Griffith, and even in the fall, I feel like you got to see a lot of these 11U games. Give me your thoughts on Carson Griffith's 2023 heading into 2024.
Yeah, I think in the fall, Carson started to kind of change the narrative about himself. What I mean is, he started the fall batting like 8th or 9th in the lineup for that team. And I remember I was talking to Mac about the lineup just in general, and I was like, "Look, this Carson Griffith guy, has one of the best batting average on the team, one of the best OPSs. He's batting down the 8 or 9 hole." He's like, "Well, that's how kind of Carson played during the summer. He was an 8 or 9 type hitter. He plays good defense, and he's gonna throw strikes on the mound." And then I know he ended the fall batting somewhere in the top 5. So I think he kind of changed the narrative on himself, and I think he's worked very hard again in the offseason. So again, another guy that I have no questions about, that he's going to be a superstar in 2024.
Yeah, and as this 11U Floyd team looks to continue to develop, I think they're looking to Carson to do it on all 3 sides of the ball, because I feel like a lot of times that's how you build your roster. The core of your roster is going to be built of guys who can do all 3. They can play good defense, they can pitch, and they can hit. And that's kind of how you build the core of your team. And Carson's a great example of that. And, another thing he can do is catch. I'm not sure how much catching he's going to do. I've heard, it feels like some weeks Mac kind of implies that Carson's going to catch a lot, and then other weeks Mac implies Carson's not going to catch so much. So I'm not sure that the 11U group has really decided on what Carson's full-time role is going to be, but whether it's third, short, or catcher, I think Carson's going to be a really good player for this team. Speaking of a guy who can do it in all 3 facets of the game, let's go to our next player in Caden Inman. Just won the BWL Cy Young Award. This guy has, really perennially been a Cy Young candidate since he joined the Bears. I mean, he's always been a very good pitcher. KJ, I did want to get your thoughts on his offense, because, Caden, I feel like we saw different versions of him last year. I feel like there were times where he was the core of this lineup. He was the main run producer. And then there were times where it felt like he was slipping down toward the bottom of the order, couldn't come through. And I feel like we've seen different versions of him at the plate. I know he's coming off of a great pitching BWL, but maybe in just okay hitting BWL. So KJ, give me your thoughts on Caden Inman's 2023, and how do you see him going into 2024?
Yeah, I thought 2023 for Caden offensively, it was a year of, ups and downs. And that's kind of how Caden's always been. When things are going right, Caden can be a top 3 hitter on one of the best teams of the Bears. But when things are going wrong, sometimes you think about even putting him in the lineup. So I think, he hasn't shown me necessarily yet in the BWL that he's ready to not be that inconsistent player anymore. But obviously, like you said, his defense is so good. He's one of the best pitchers in the Bears organization. That's going to earn him more at-bats. But on the offensive side, he's just got to find more consistency. When he's going, he's going. We just got to get him going more often.
Yeah, and Caden is a guy who, he's been solid. I'm looking at his kind of career numbers right here, and he's always kind of hit in that 390 to 440 range. He's always been in that area. So you're talking about a guy who's just been consistent for this team. But I think, at least for me, I think there's a little bit extra layer of upside that he hasn't quite unlocked yet, and that's kind of what I'm looking forward to see. Because if I remember right, I believe, did he not hit the first Bear home run last season, and it was a bomb at Strel? I believe that's right, if I remember correctly. But so he's got that kind of power to where he could be a guy who just, is one of the top hitters on this team. Just need to see it a little bit more consistently. Let's go ahead and switch gears here. I've got 2 guys who are definitely more known for their pitching, but I'm actually excited to see what both can deliver with the bat this season. And let's go ahead and start this with Logan Eckert. Bernie, I know you've been all over the Logan Eckert train in terms of his pitching. He is a multi-Cy Young Award winner. This is a guy who has, just like Caden, been one of the best pitchers in the entire Bears. But now, what can we kind of expect from his bat? I know he started to really, turn things up in the fall. In terms of his offensive numbers, he had, in his career, he's kind of had an uptick in terms of the offensive numbers. This year had the second most extra base hit rates in his second highest extra base hit rate in his career. So this is a guy who I think is on the uptrend, and definitely the exit velocity is there. But Bernie, give me your thoughts on Logan Eckert on the offensive side.
Yeah, I'm not gonna sit here and act like I've watched 100 Logan Eckert in game at bats. But I've seen this guy free swing. I've seen him in the cage a little bit. A couple things I found out: he hits the ball really hard for his age. His metrics are good. If you look at him in the cage, he looks like one of the better hitters at the age. I think that maybe just for him, maybe last year is him getting his feet wet, facing top level pitching, and this year with those reps under his belt, with the BWO under his belt, he can kind of shake those PO vibes and be a good contributing bat for this team. He's not. I mean, if I'm being honest, he's not going to be Ben Combs and Anderson of this team. But if Logan settles in batting 6, 7, 8, that is a very, very good season for Logan Eckert.
Yeah, and I know he's very hungry to get more at bats. He doesn't want to be known as a PO type player. And I will say his defense has come a long way. I mean, he went into the winter as a pretty rough second baseman. I know he even moved to the outfield for a bit. He was catching for a bit. And then he found a home at third base, and he's looked really good over there. He's definitely been the second best defensive third baseman during practices, right behind Ben Combs. And I think there's been practices where Logan's looked like the best third baseman at times. So defensively, I think Logan, you can definitely rely on him in the infield. And when he hits it, he's going to hit it hard. It's just a question mark of how often is he going to hit it hard. A strikeout rate of over 25% last year. Got to cut down on those, and you'd love to see him hit for a little bit more power. But I think the potential is definitely there. Another guy who has been known as a Cy Young candidate throughout his Bear career and is kind of, starting to figure it out at the plate a little bit is Santiago Story. This is a guy who, always known as a guy who's going to get on base a lot. But I think the question marks is the power and just the overall offensive consistency. KJ, when you look at a guy like Santiago Story, obviously you know what he's going to give you offensively. You know what he's going to give you on the mound. You know what he's going to give you defensively. But what do you think Santiago can give you offensively going into 2024?
Yeah, we often talk about this Dalton team, and for guys like Santi, the Dalton team doesn't need more superstars. They need consistent guys, and I think Santi is consistent. I know there was times where he batted, 1 or 2 on that team. There's times he batted in key spots. And there's times he bats at the bottom of the order. But Santi's always going to be consistent for you. He's not going to be a guy who hits, 5, 10 home runs. But I think he's going to get on base. He takes good at bats. And that's all really that Dalton team needs out of him offensively.
Yeah, and he definitely plays his role well. I know we've talked about this with a couple different Dalton guys. He definitely is a guy who plays his role well and does his job. And like you said, KJ, he has it at the top of the order just because he does get on base a lot. I mean, an on base percentage of 450 last year, which at 16U is very, very good. And that coming with, again, not a lot of power, and even a 290 batting average, but he's going to get on base, he's going to put the ball in play for the most part, and he's going to do his job offensively. I do think there's more upside than he's shown. I know, he had a couple balls last year that were just barely missing, over the fence home runs, or even just going foul, or just getting caught at the warning track. So I do think he's got a little bit more in him. But I just like to see it a little bit more consistently from him. That superstar level Santi. Obviously, he's got a very high floor. Moving into a next guy who definitely has that superstar potential. I think the question is going to be, how high is the floor? And that is Eric Latrina, arguably one of the most impressive players in the Bears Winter League, and arguably one of the best players in the Bears last year. Just did it on a Driscoll team where obviously the expectations are a little lower. Maybe the competition's a little bit lower. So Eric Latrina, I mean, when you talk about his numbers, gaudy numbers. I mean, a near 600 batting average, 1,400 OPS. His numbers were arguably the best of all the third basemen. But again, they're doing it on a second level team. I think no doubt Eric's going to start the year with the top team this year. And Bernie, what are your expectations for Eric Latrina coming off a monster season with Driscoll? How do you see him translating that into a Floyd year?
Yeah. If you just look at the Floyd roster, right? They have Landon Anderson and Ben Combs playing their corners. But I think Eric's a good enough athlete and defender where he could play realistically almost anywhere on the field that you put him. He's a Gold Glove first baseman. He's a very good defensive third baseman, so there's no reason to believe that he can't play anywhere else. But like you said, we don't know where his floor is at, but his ceiling is high. I think if you would talk about Eric Latrina maybe even a year ago, that you would have said the complete opposite. He used to walk a lot, get on base, but there was almost no power in the bat. I think that now kind of narrative's changed about him to where this guy hits some bombs, his X-rays, hits numbers are up, but it does come with some strikeouts. But I think that's been the evolution of his game, and I think that he's going to prove that he belongs at least on the 15 Floyd roster this season.
Yeah, and Bernie, I do want to touch on one of the things you mentioned there. Eric, I think for a long time has been kind of that, at least when you look at his numbers in the past, he has struck out a lot. But last year, I think, was kind of the outlier. And maybe it's just the lower competition. He had by far his lowest strikeout rate of his career. Typically he's around the 20% range. Last year, he struck out 7% of his plate appearances. So this is a guy who, again, maybe it's just the lower competition, or maybe he's taken an evolution in his game to where he can be that power combo without striking out a lot. So that'll be the interesting thing for me to see against the higher level competition. Do his extra base hits stay the same, or do they go down? Do his strikeout rate stay the same, or does it go up? And that's kind of what I'm going to be looking for with Eric Latrina. And then one more guy who I thought raised their stock a lot in the BWL season was Sam Dollins. This is a guy who I think has always kind of been, it feels weird because he's had several different kind of evolutions of his game. I remember when he first joined the Bears, he was this power, power or strikeout outfielder. And then now he's like a slick fielding, pitching infielder. And, it's kind of the lines have blurred of what Sam Dollins is in the Bears. And I think this is going to be the most complete version of Sam Dollins we've seen. KJ, you got a chance to coach against him this year in the BWL. What did you think of Sam Dollins with the bat, and how do you think he's going to fare on this Burn team in 2024?
Yeah, Sam played against pitchers, that are playing in college next year. He played against top of the line varsity arms. And, he was one of the best hitters on that throwback teams. This guy hit some balls that, if we're outdoors, go far, far away. So, he's a perfect guy to be the top dog on the second level team. And I think he's going to make enough noise to where, he's going to force himself to get called up. Again, it's just about finding the consistency for him. I think the highs for Sam are very, very high. And the lows can be low. So I think just finding consistency for Sam, if he can have those highs more often, I think we talk about Sam as a top 30 player in the Bears organization. That's how good of a hitter I think he can be.
Yeah, 100%. Last year he, kept his extra base hit rate the same as the year before, but he cut his strikeout rate about 5%. And I think if he continues on that trend, maybe even adding a little bit more power, I think you could start talking about Sam in that light, KJ, like you said. Moving into the next category here, our depth. These are guys who are definitely, I think, going to start the year with the second level team. And maybe in some cases the third level team, but guys who I think, have some potential here. Some of these guys are in their first year with the Bears, and some of these guys are a little bit more veteran. But I think all these guys are very interesting to talk about. And let's go ahead and get things started here. We'll break these guys into pairs just to kind of save some time. Let's start with these two 15U third basemen, Braden Colburn and Ethan Portell. I think both these guys, I would say they're a little bit opposites. I think Braden Colburn, at least potential-wise, I think Braden is a very slick defender with questionable hitting, and I think Ethan Portell is a very good hitter with some questionable defense. I think we haven't quite seen Ethan Portell put it together in games, but I know in the cage he's really turned some heads. I know he's impressed Rob with some of the swings he's taking in the cage, and I think he's got at least of the two guys here, a little bit more potential to hit for some power. And I do want to throw this to you, KJ. These two guys, Braden Colburn and Ethan Portell, I think both have some potential here to really take good strides in 2024. I think they've both been putting a lot of work in at practice. Neither one of them has really missed very much. And I know they're both in extra programs. So what do you think about these two guys, KJ, their 2023 season and then moving into 2024 for Braden Colburn and Ethan Portell?
Yeah, I haven't seen much of Colburn, but I know for Portell, he's a guy who's been a consistent precision pitching member, and I know, he's going to be needed on some team, whichever team he's on, to pitch. I think that's going to earn him some more bats. He's not too bad at third base either, which is kind of a thin position. And you always need a good third baseman. So I think Portell's going to earn his at bats through there, and like you said, he's shown upside in the cage. I really think for Portell, it's more of a confidence thing, on the mound and at the plate. It's all mental for him. And if he's in the right headspace, if he's confident, he can be a very solid player.
Yeah, I agree. Talking about Colburn a little bit, I think there's a little bit of potential with the bat. He's one of those guys that's very, very passive. And, that's not uncommon when guys join the Bears. He's very passive. He almost always takes a pitch before he'll take a strike before he swings. He never will swing 3-0, and it's just stuff that has been drilled into him by other coaches where he's just too passive. And I think if he gets a little bit more aggressive at the plate, maybe we could see a little bit more offensive potential. But in terms of defense, I think Braden Colburn is very, very good on the defensive side of the ball. And I think there's a chance that these two guys are competing for playing time on either Driscoll or Latrani. I think there's a chance they're competing with each other. And I think Ethan, if he's going to want to win the job, it's going to have to be out hitting because I think Colburn maybe has a leg up on him on the defensive side. Moving into these next two guys, these are two guys who, are definitely going to start the year on the lower level teams. I think both have some really good untapped potential, and I think are both having a really good winter. And they are Owen Pritchett and Jack Winehouse. Jack has yet to see game action for the Bears. He joined right after the fall season ended. And then Owen Pritchett, this guy who, he's been around for a little while, had a really solid winner for sure, and had some moments last year where he looked like a good player in the making. Bernie, when you look at these two guys, Owen Pritchett and Jack Winehouse, I think both of them have a lot of untapped potential and are both having a very good winter so far. Give me your thoughts on Owen Pritchett and Jack Winehouse. Bernie, if you're talking, you're muted.
And we're back. All right. So I'll start with Winehouse real quick. I've not seen this guy hit, either very little or not at all. But just from what I've seen him in practice, he's a very solid defender at third. I think he has potential to be, one of the better third basemen in the Bears, and he works very hard at practice. And with Pritchett, I know his exit velo and free swings up in the 70s, which is one of the top ones at 11U. Even though we haven't seen it on the field as much, I think that this winter has really came in and worked hard. And I think there is that power you see in free swing that can transfer to the field. We've seen it before with, a number of guys that it takes a little bit of time, a lot of reps to really see it on the field. And I think that, maybe not start the year, but at some point this year, we'll see it come out of them. Who knows? Maybe at the end of the summer, we're talking about Pritchett being in competition for the 11U Floyd spot.
Yeah, I think Owen's had a really good winter. He's worked hard. He's been one of the guys that has impressed me in practice. As I've gotten a chance to work these 11U guys a little bit more, he's a guy who's really impressed me with how hard he works. He's a good kid, and I think his parents, his family is really invested in his baseball success, and I think we could see, and maybe it's not this year, maybe it's 2025, but I think we're going to be talking about Owen Pritchett as a top team player in the next year or two. So really excited for him. And Jack, I think has kind of been universally respected as he joined the Bears, by his teammates and by the coaching staff. He works hard, and I think he's been really impressive on the defensive side. He's got a little swing and miss in his game for sure. I've seen him take some real hacks in the cage and swing and miss at soft toss, but I think he's got the potential to really have a nice season in his first season with the Bears. Obviously, we haven't seen him at all in a real game yet. So I'm excited to see what we're going to get from Jack Winehouse. And then these last two guys, these two I would say are completely in different scenarios. In one side, we have a guy who kind of his stock is a little bit up in the air right now because he joined the Bears and had a really high stock. I think he was up in the top 5 of our prospects list, and then didn't quite have the 2023 season that I think a lot of people hoped for him. Ended up, kind of flip-flopping between all 3 rosters at 15U, and that's Matt Bender, who I think everybody agrees has the highest potential of any of these third basemen potentially, but definitely has a low floor, and we saw that last year. And then we have a guy who's, came into the Bears super raw, and has kind of just been on the uptick the last 2 seasons, and that's Connor Murphy. And these are 2 guys who I think both have something to prove in 2024. For Matt, I think he's ready to prove that potential is not over. He's still got that kind of level in him, and he's ready to be a top team guy. And for Connor, I think he's trying to prove that the strides he made last year are just the beginning for his baseball development, and he's trying to take another step forward. KJ, when you look at these 2 guys, Matt Bender and Connor Murphy, both in very different positions in their Bear career, but I think both have a lot to prove in 2024. Give me your thoughts on these 2 guys.
Yeah, for Connor Murphy, I think this guy's taken a step up in his work ethic this offseason. I know he was a guy who, he was at free swing, and then he has his own free swing, and then he was subbing in other people's free swings. Just trying to get extra swings in, trying to get extra work in. And he's really taken a step up in work ethic. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he had a chance on Floyd last year. And so I think, that he got a taste of that, and, he's worked really hard to get back there. I think he's going to have his best season yet coming up. And for Matt Bender, again, I think, really it's just confidence for Matt. I think, falling from that top potential guy, and, he hasn't necessarily lived up to the expectations yet. But you saw in the BWL, I mean, A-League, he was really struggling. He got moved down to B-League, and he was one of the best hitters in that league. So, again, I think Matt still has all the potential there. I think he's a good third baseman. He's good at second base. He can hit for power. He obviously has the exit velo. We're just waiting for Matt Bender to unlock. And, a lot of times with these guys, sometimes, it isn't, a Garrett Knight type situation where he's, on the bottom team dominating one day, and the next day he's dominating on the top team. I think it takes time for a lot of these guys. And I think Matt Bender is going to be one of the guys, we look at maybe not this next season, but I think in the fall and going into next spring, Matt's really going to live up to that hype that we made for him.
Yeah, for me, I'd love to see him have that kind of dominant year, even if it is on the second team where he puts up those Garrett Knight-esque numbers. Or, and a great example is Eric Latrina. Matt Bender, Eric Latrina was a top team guy, got sent down, and then kind of grinded his way, had a monster year with Driscoll. And now, all things considered, he's probably going to be a top team guy this year and probably in the starting lineup. Matt Bender, I'd love to see him go down and have a monster year with Driscoll, a Kobe Kennedy, Eric Latrina-esque year. And then 2025, we're talking about him as a starter going into opening day with that Floyd roster. So I'm excited for both these guys. Like you said, KJ, Connor Murphy did get a weekend with the top team last year. And I think it was indicative of his work ethic and his production with the lower level teams. And I think he's got a chip on his shoulder. He's seen, I know he's really good buddies with Braden Miller, and I think he's seen Braden get a lot of hype around him, and he's definitely going to be top team roster. I think he's got a chip on his shoulder to kind of get there with Braden going into 2024. Then finally, we have our up-and-comers. These three guys are all three going to be top 50 prospects when we make our list in March, coming up very soon. And I think all three of these guys have a lot of potential, and I think all three of these guys have some expectation going into 2024. And let's go ahead and get things started here at the top with Caden Roberts. This is a guy who I think nobody really knew about going into the fall. I got to be honest, I didn't even really know this guy's name for the first couple practices. I told him, if you want me to remember your name, make me remember your name. And he certainly did. At first it was him impressing me at practice for a couple of weeks. And then he got a chance at BWL. It impressed me a heck of a lot in BWL with the kind of numbers he was putting up and the kind of at-bats he was taking against, again, KJ, like you said, these college level pitchers. Bernie, when you're looking at a guy like Caden Roberts, this is a guy who I think has the size, has the work ethic, and now it's just about can he put it together? And I think he's had his moments. Bernie, give me your thoughts on Caden Roberts heading into 2024.
Yeah, a guy that's been very impressive with his work ethic, like you said, over this course of this winter in practice in BWL. I'm not 100% sure where Cade's going to end up as far as team goes or roster goes or even starting lineup spot. But I think wherever he ends up, the bat is going to be what keeps him in the lineup. I've seen this guy practice. He's not a bad third baseman. He's not a liability there, but he's definitely, at least not right now, a plus defender at third base. But his bat's really impressed me. I think this guy has a lot of power in him, big kid. It's going to come with some strikeouts, but I think the good will outweigh the bad in 2024. And I think there will be some growing pains. I think he's still relatively, even though he's an older kid, I don't want to say new to baseball, but like that new to competitive baseball type vibe. And I think that, he'll get a lot of good experience this year.
Yeah, 100%. I expect him to get probably full starting lineup at bats, whichever roster he's on. And I think there's a chance Caden Roberts, I think he hits 3 or 4 home runs this year. I think there's a chance of that. He's got that kind of power. I think he's going to have a really nice high school season. He's trained harder this winter than he probably ever has in his life, and now he's going to take that. And I think he's going to see some success with his high school team and bring it right back into the summer. And I think he could have a really nice year. A guy who I think is very similar to Caden Roberts, except we're getting him, 6 years younger, is Rudy Montenegro Langley. This is a guy who was our number 2 prospect in the last list we did. I think that, he's probably going to be our number 2 prospect again in the next list we do. And I think in a lot of different prospect pools, he'd be our number 1. Unfortunately, he's behind Joey Burgess right now. But Rudy Montenegro Langley, this is a guy who I think all three of us are super high on going into 2024. I think he's going to have, a bid for the Rookie of the Year in 2024, coming off of a really nice fall, or, I would say an inconsistent fall, but had his moments. And, I think same thing could be said for BWL. KJ, this is a guy who I know all three of us like, but give me your thoughts on Rudy Montenegro Langley. What have you seen from him so far? And what do you think the potential for 2024 is for Rudy?
Yeah, I think it took Rudy a little bit to buy in, but now he is fully bought in with his swing. I mean, if you watch this guy hit the cage, it's ridiculous. What he does in free swing, what he does in the cage. I think, and I think it's going to be very quickly to see it translate into the game. I know in the BWL he's facing, pitchers. He's never not on the level he's ever faced. And by the end of the year, he was putting up really good at bats. He had a lot of long flyouts that are outs indoors, but that are shots outdoors. So, the sky's the limit for Rudy. I think, that team has been looking for another guy to back up a Harrison Blowbaum. And, I think it was a case at 18U where they have, Mac and Brennan, that 1-2 punch can, it doesn't matter what the rest of the lineup is. That 1-2 punch won them a lot of games. I think that's what it's going to be for Burnsdale, even though, although they have more pieces in that team. But, I think that Rudy Harrison punch is going to combine for double-digit home runs.
Yeah, I think there's definitely the potential for that. KJ, I actually did want to ask you, this is not a question I prepared you with at all, but just wanted to get your thoughts. When you talk about the Rookie of the Year conversation, a player can't win Rookie of the Year twice, so that takes Jack Kester out of the equation. So when you're looking at guys like Owen Haynes, Noah Hendricks, and then, of course, Rudy, and, any other rookie you can think of, where do you think Rudy stacks up looking at the spring-summer 2024 Rookie of the Year conversation?
I think I'm more of a hitter guy, so that eliminates a lot of those good pitchers like that you named. And I really do think is Joey Burgess considered a rookie?
No, bro, Joey's not a rookie.
Okay, well, I think Rudy, in my mind, he's already top 20 hitter in the Bears. Just when I see this offseason, I think he's ready to prove it. He was hungry all offseason long. I think Rudy's going to maul this year. I think he's going to be at the top. I think if we were to make odds on Rudy winning Rookie of the Year, he'd be heavily favored.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Obviously, Jack Kester, I think, would have been the competition. But again, we made that rule. It was actually the knife-free rule. Funny enough, we made the knife-free rule that you can't win Rookie of the Year twice. If you win it your fall, you are ineligible your summer. So Jack Kester is ineligible for the award. And I think that would have been the big competition for Rudy. Now, these other guys, Owen Haynes is a very nice player, good two-way player. Noah Hendricks, obviously, more of the pitching side. But I do think Rudy is probably the favorite looking at the 2024 odds. And now the final player here in the up and comers and in the third base preview is Hugh Holloway. This is a guy brand new to the Bears. I think, joined like 5 weeks ago. So brand new. I have not seen him take any swings. I don't believe, Bernie, you've seen him take any swings, but we've seen him pitch and we've seen him play defense. And I got to say, he's been very impressive in both of those aspects. So one can only imagine what he's going to be able to do at the bat. But Bernie, this is a guy who I think, without seeing him swing, he's already a top 50 prospect in my mind. What do you think, is kind of the upside for Hugh going into 2024, his first Bear season?
Yeah, like you said, I have not seen Hugh take any swings either. Before I've seen him pitching in practice, right? He's newer to pitching, right? He joined the pitching right when he joined. And this kid, when he comes in to work hard and he picks up on stuff really quick. I saw the same thing in practice. Work ethic, again, was nearly unmatched. He actually looks like a pretty good defensive third baseman. Not elite Gold Glove yet, but not a liability. He's solid over there. So just 2024 again. I have no idea. Where this guy kind of stacks up with, Driscoll or training a type roster. Whatever roster he's going to be on, the coach is going to love him. It's going to give him some chances here, and I think that at the end of the year, he's going to be a little more established, and then going into 2025, we could be talking about it as a possible Floyd candidate.
Yeah, I think there's a really good chance he's going to be Driscoll's starting third baseman and one of their best pitchers. Obviously, there's a lot of infielders on that Driscoll team, but I think there's definitely a chance of that. And if he's on Latrania, I think he's definitely going to be Latrania's ace. And I think this is a guy who, there's not a lot of guys who come in their first Bear practice and look like they can hang, right? And he, not only did he want to be in the top group, the other players wanted him to be in the top group, and he wasn't making his teammates do a lot of push-ups. I think his first practice, I think he made, in four corners, like the second ball he touched, he threw it away and made everybody do push-ups. I don't think he made another error the rest of the night. And that's the kind of player, I think he's there to compete. He's there to get better. And I'm really excited to see what we're going to see from Hugh Holloway going into 2024. Okay, let's go ahead and end the show here with our sleepers and our breakouts. Third base, I think, a very interesting position for this exercise because there's some guys who, showed a lot of potential but haven't yet put it all together. There's some guys who I think are really good sleeper candidates. So really excited here. If you haven't seen our other position previews, a sleeper is a player who, again, is a little bit under the radar. I think whoever picks a player for their sleeper thinks they're going to perform much better than kind of the public perception. And it's a guy who's going to be really valuable despite not getting a lot of credit. And then a breakout is a guy who's going to go from whatever tier of a player they're in and jump one or two tiers up. The tiers for me are prospect, role player, starter, star, and superstar. So if a guy is a starter right now, to break out, he'd have to become a star or superstar type player. So let's go ahead, and KJ, we'll start with you here with your sleeper. You're going to go ahead and go with Quinn Jack Winehouse here. KJ, give me your thoughts of Jack Winehouse as a sleeper.
Yeah, Jack Winehouse, this guy is a really good athlete. I know he's really good defensively, and he's very solid offensively. I think, he's going to be in a situation where he is starting on the bottom team, and I think that's going to be just what he needs. I think, just pure athleticism is going to lead to Jack having a lot of success this year for that Kreitler squad is what I imagine he'll be on, and I think he's going to, end up working his way up the ranks. But, just a pure athlete. Someone definitely that a bottom team can rely on to play good third base, which is very important at that age. I just think he's gonna have a really nice year, and I think he ends up working his way up to Bell, and maybe even on a Floyd bench.
Yeah, I think he's definitely got that kind of potential, KJ. I think defensively, he's already a Bell-ready product, and I think offensively, he's just got he's got some kinks to work on. I think once he gets a little confident, once he gets comfortable swinging hard, I think there's definitely a chance for Jack Winehouse to quickly rise up the ranks. Bernie, you're going to go with Braden Colburn of your sleeper. Bernie, for me, I got to say, I think Braden is much more of a defensive-minded player for my liking, but Bernie, give me your thoughts here on Braden Colburn. Do you think there's that offensive upside, or what do you like in Braden Colburn as your sleeper?
Yeah, like you said, I think he's already, nearly top team ready defensively at third base. And I think that, all the problems that, we call them problems that we talked about a little bit earlier in the show about Braden Colburn, about him being too passive, taking before he swings, not swinging 3-0. That's all stuff that eventually, when they're with the Bears for long enough, get fixed. I think this kid, when he does swing, he swings hard. And I think that, just being here for another offseason, I think his offense has to take a tick up. I think he's going to be put in a spot to where, if he's on Latrania, he's going to be one of the best hitters, and he's going to be obviously a starting third baseman with his Gold Glove. He's on Driscoll. He's going to compete for a starting spot. So where this guy ends up, he's going to be a useful asset to him. And I think the bat, after being here now for, I believe he's been here for almost a full year now, will take a nice tick up this season.
Yeah, I definitely, I think he is top team ready with the glove, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at third base. I think he could play short, he could play second. I think he could play anywhere in the infield. I'd really like to see a lot more from that bat going into 2024. And like you said, Bernie, sometimes that bat does take a little bit more to develop. He's got to buy into that bear approach of being aggressive and swing as hard as you can. But I think the potential's there. I'm going to go with a guy who definitely swings as hard as he can, and that is Caden Roberts as my sleeper. I really like this guy. I think over the last, 2 months or so, there's not a high school player that their stock has risen higher for me than Caden Roberts. This went from a guy who I really kind of didn't really think much about. Like I said, I told him I didn't really care to learn his name. I was really hard on this guy. He's a guy who I didn't think had much potential at all, and he really turned the coin for me. Really proved me wrong with his work ethic, really proved me wrong with his play. And Bernie, you mentioned, he's definitely not a superstar over there defensively at third base, but I think he's made some plays that I didn't expect him to make, especially in BWL and even at practice. I think he goes through moments where he'll make like 3 errors in a row, just 3 bad errors, and then he'll make 3 nice plays in a row. So I think this guy's got a lot of potential. He's definitely made a believer of me. So I think he could have a really nice season. Like I said, I think he's got 3 to 5 home run potential as well. So I'll go ahead and go with Caden Roberts for my sleeper. And now moving into our breakouts. Bernie, I'll let you go first here. I think I speak for me and KJ to say that we all believe in this breakout. I think this is kind of the universal breakout at this position. And that's Rudy Montenegro Langley. Bernie, you coach this guy. I think it's only right that you get to issue him as your breakout. Give me your thoughts about Rudy going into 2024.
Yeah, lucky enough, I got first dibs at the breakout spot. So obviously I took my boy Rudy. Like KJ said last fall, there were some balls Rudy hit where you're like, oh my gosh, this guy's the second coming of Harrison Blaibon. And then he'd have some moments where he'd just do some dumb things that looked like he has never played baseball in his life. But I think, we've seen over the course of his winter, right? First of all, he's hit the winter very hard. He's been one of the hardest workers on the team, rivalry, Harrison Blaibon and, even Hunter Finley. But even his BWL at bats, he's faced some top guys like Cam and Caden, who are universally considered, some of the top pitchers at 13 and even in the Bears. And I know there was a moment in BWL where I think Rudy struck out, but Robbie came to me and he was like, that was great at bat. And I think that's what we saw him get better and better over the course of the winter. Even in the strikeouts, right? He was laying off curveballs, swinging at the right fastballs, right, swinging hard. And we saw some of those results come to fruition toward the end of BWL, right? He had a big home run in the championship weekend. And for 2024, he's going to be put right in a good spot in the lineup to where he's going to bat, either 1, 2, or 3. He's going to be Harrison Blaibon and Owen Lewis's running mates all year. And I think that, this guy definitely has, I know KJ said Blaibon and Rudy combined have 10 home run potential. I think each of them has 10 home run potential in 2024.
Yeah, and I was really worried that Rudy was going to be way too passive. You look at his walk rate and, it's 20%. And a lot of times when you see guys who walk that much, usually it's because they're just taking a lot of strikes and, kind of hoping to walk. But that was not the case with Rudy. And it was so great to see because his at-bats, he looked overmatched in week 1. And then by week 4, he was still getting out, but he didn't look overmatched. And then by week 7, he was getting on base and didn't look overmatched at all. He wasn't necessarily getting a lot of hits, but he was finding ways on base. And then it all kind of crescendoed into the championship week where he comes up with one of the biggest hits of the game for the throwbacks, hit a big home run in that game off Caden Inman, where it just kind of felt like he put it all together as the season went on. When he swings really hard and he swings at strikes. It's not like he goes up there and is walking a lot because he's passive and he's taking strikes. He walks because he's not going to chase. He's not going to swing at curveballs in the dirt. He's not going to swing at fastballs over his head. He's going to be patient, and when he gets a fastball, he's going to unload on it. And I think Rudy's got a ton of potential here. And one thing I feel like you didn't mention, Bernie, is his defense. I think is going to be really impressive. He's going to have his fair share of errors in his first season, but he's going to be a plus defender because he's going to make some plays that nobody else makes. And I think he could even play shortstop if the need arises for that. I think he could even do that because he's so athletic. KJ, looking at your breakout, you've got another guy who was a BWL superstar here in Eric Latrenia. I think this guy, you could say he kind of had a breakout year last year, but it's a little bit different when it's on the second team. I think to truly break out, you got to do it with the varsity squad. KJ, give me your thoughts on why you think Eric Latrenia is going to break out for that Floyd roster.
Yeah, this guy dominated on the B League and BWL to start the year. He forced my hand and made me call him up to the A team, and he dominated there. And then I needed a first baseman for a weekend at 18U, and he dominated there, and he was in the starting lineup for the rest of the way, including the championship. So, this guy was the best player in BWL, out of everyone, not just out of the breakout candidates, not just out of the third basemen. This guy was the best out of anyone. And he hit some balls. I mean, hard, far. He's taking a lot of walks. He's not striking out a lot. He's being aggressive, but yet laying off breaking balls, crushing fastballs. I think it's just all of where Eric's gonna, fit into that Floyd lineup. They're stacked. They're deep in his positions. I think, his bat is gonna force him somewhere. Like Bernie said, he's good enough where he can play multiple spots. I don't see an argument of where you can convince me that Eric Latrenia isn't, top team ready after what he did this winter against, pitchers that he's never, faced before. Guys, older than him, guys committed to college already, guys throwing 80 miles an hour. It didn't matter. Eric Latrenia raked all season long. And I think, like I said, he was the best hitter in all the BWL, not just third baseman. I think he's primed for a huge year.
Yeah, and KJ, when you're talking about kind of the lineup situation for 14U Floyd, or for 15 Floyd rather, it sounds weird, but they really didn't have an everyday EH, as weird as that sound. It was Evan Little for a while, Logan Ecker, when he was playing well, he kind of EH'd, a lot of their games. But for the most part, he didn't, they didn't really have a consistent EH. So I think that there's a chance that could be Eric's role. And obviously, platooning around the infield as well. So I think there's a chance for that. And I think there's a chance he could pitch as well for this team. I'm going to go with Logan Eckert. This is a guy who I think obviously is a superstar on the mound, but I think he's got a lot of potential at the plate. I think he's got home run power, as we've seen before, and I think he's going to put it all together this year. And again, when you're talking about a breakout, obviously it's relative to the player. I don't think Logan Eckert is going to come out and be a superstar, but I think he's going to earn starting at bats, even when he's not pitching. I think you could say he was a platoon or role player last year. I think he's going to break out into that starting lineup and be a guy that is going to get every day at bats for this team. And I think he's going to hit a couple home runs this year. I think that he's got that kind of potential. That's going to do it for our third base preview here. Next week, we'll move on to the shortstop position, which is one of the star-studded positions in the Bears, and a lot of interesting names at that. So we'll have a shortstop next week, but that's going to do it for this episode of BBN After Dark. KJ, Bernie, thank you for joining me, and we'll talk to y'all next week.